Microcasting for your city, Talkopolis. Emerging Artists is brought to you this week by Signorama. They did a great job for us here at Talkopolis, so give Greg a call at 615-678-6078. They make great signs, beautiful banners, awesome service at an affordable price. If you like our banner, get one for yourself. They work fast and they do amazing work. Hi everybody, welcome to Music Business Week. Our guest today is Music Supervisor Sarah Gavigan. Alrighty, I'm Greta Gaines. Welcome to the show. Sarah, it's so great to have you here. Thanks for joining us today to talk to us about some of the tricks of the trade.
Thanks for having me.
Tell everybody who are unfamiliar with music supervision what you do and also how you got started in doing what you do.
Okay, so anytime you see picture, whether that is a film or a television show or an advertisement, and that picture has music in the background or in the foreground, a music supervisor's job is to source that music, to find it creatively, to come up with different ideas, whether we're simply taking a track that already exists, or we're re-recording a song that already exists, or creating an entirely new song, and then going through all of the legal clearances to make sure that that song can be used in that piece.
Okay, so how did you get into music supervision?
I guess like all great things, it kind of happened by accident. I was working as an agent for cinematographers and found myself all of a sudden surrounded by a lot of musicians, and it was in the late 90s, and as indie labels were really starting to come about, and I found myself at a crossroads where I was in between the advertising industry and a lot of incredibly talented indie musicians that were trying to find a way to pay the bills. And I took an opportunity. So I started out essentially as what we would call a rep. And there's really two sides to the music licensing industry that you need to consider: the buyer side and the seller side. So I started out on the seller side, representing the people that own the music and helping them find the opportunities to place that music. Now I'm on the other side, and as a music supervisor, I represent the buyer. So whether that would be a television show or a movie or a brand or an advertising agency, that would be who hires me as a music supervisor. I go out and deal with the sellers.
Okay, so for a lot of us musicians out there, this is one of the ways, only ways sometimes, you can actually make money as a musician.
Yeah.
How do you go about vetting what music, and how do you deal with indie bands and people who want to get their music into either a commercial or into a television show? What do you tell those indie bands?
Well, the first thing you need to know is actually what music is being used and why. One of the most simple things that you can do that I tell almost every musician I meet: start just a random sign up on Google, just, you know, abc123@gmail.com, and make that a new channel on YouTube. Start subscribing to brands, start subscribing to television shows, to studios, and every time they put up a new video, they're going to ping you and let you know. That's why you probably don't want to use your everyday email to do that. But the real idea is to start watching music and why it's being used. When you're in the moment in front of your own television watching a show at night, the music is probably just passing you by, because part of our job is to make that fabric weave together. But when you're watching something specifically for the music and you're paying attention to it in a different way, you're going to start to see certain styles that are being used over and over again and why. Then you need to think, is my music like that?
Right, but one thing that's a little confusing is that you think that they want an established band and that they're maybe going to pull a track that you've already made. But there's also such a thing as composing specifically for. Yes. So explain the differences between those and how somebody would go about starting to compose for a more commercial sound.
Right. Well, let me back that up a little bit and say that, you know, if you feel that your music is viable for licensing, whether in any of those different formats, you know, movie, TV, or whether your music are songs or they're cues, what you're saying. Cues basically means spelled with a C. It denotes a piece of music that was created specifically for film. It's not a song. It's just a piece of music that's going to help an emotion occur and sit behind the film, or voiceover, or special effects, sound effects, anything else that's going on sound-wise. So many musicians find that, and I deal with a lot of non-touring musicians as well as musicians that have, are out on the road trying to break a record and being performers. There's so many musicians out there that find that they have a huge catalog that they're kind of sitting on and they don't know what to do with it and how do they make money on that. So, if you've got a bunch of cues, you definitely want to start looking at music libraries. Music libraries are a huge source of income for musicians, and it's a portion of the industry that has gotten larger and larger as time's gone by because, as we know, there continue to be more screens every day. As we're sitting here now, this is going to be, cast through the web. There's probably going to be an intro or an outro that has a little piece of music to it. Where is that music coming from? How is that music being found? Most people that are working in video production are using music libraries to find that music.
So would you create your own library and then give that library to a larger library?
You create a catalog.
Okay.
And whether your style is very specific or whether you kind of consider yourself to be a jack of all trades. But studying the different styles that are used and then figuring out, okay, I'm really good at doing this, so why don't I try and write 20 tracks that are viable and really a very specific sound. Then you start going to the libraries and saying, hey, can I submit this to you? Yes, I think this is very licensable. They take it and you get a percentage of everything that they bring in.
Okay, so when you're clearing music and say an artist gets in touch with you, how do you go about making sure that all of that music is cleared and is ready to go?
Yeah, well, I'll answer that question while also helping musicians understand what rights they need to understand in order for a music supervisor to say, hey, I want to use your music. First of all, anytime you write a piece of music, it's immediately copyrighted. Library of Congress affords you that. But you need to make sure that you are affiliated with ASCAP, BMI, or CSAC, and that you're registering those songs there. Now, most musicians are probably going to own their master and their publishing. So for every song, there are two sides to that song legally. For example, if I wrote Happy Birthday, I would own the publishing. If Greta sang it, she would own the master. Then if I sang it, I would own the master and the publishing on that piece. So the publishing is never going to leave me because I wrote it physically, unless I sell it.
Okay.
But anytime someone else records it, they're going to own that master.
Okay.
So let's say that you as a musician decide that you want to cover a Dylan song. You're going to own that master. So you want to make sure, and actually you don't need permission to record a Dylan song. You can just do it. And then I, as a music supervisor, find that cover and really love it and I want to use it. So I'm going to have to go to Dylan's publisher to clear that side, and then he is going to have to give permission. It's okay for you to use this master.
And that's where it might get tricky.
Yes.
So that's where you might want to think about who you're covering and
yes,
and what the commercial viability of actually getting that song cut.
Yeah, and that can be difficult, but with a little bit of research you can find out. Like if you want to cover a Steve Winwood song, forget about it, because he will never let anyone use a master of his song.
Interesting.
Other than him. So some artists welcome it and love it. Most do, actually, because it's an additional source of income. And as we know, the majority of catalog of historical musical catalog is not owned by the musician itself. Anything, I would say probably circa 1980 or earlier, is rarely owned by the original musician. But kind of getting back to your original question, long way around, I guess. You definitely want to make sure that you're very clear about who owns the rights to your music. One of the things I find very often in Nashville is co-writes. And co-writes are really common here. There's a lot of collaboration in Nashville, which is an amazing thing when it comes to songwriting, but when it comes to licensing, it's very messy. If I see a song and I love it, if, say, a friend gave it to me and I have a project that I think it's right for, and I go on to ASCAP or BMI or CSAC to find out who owns the publishing rights, and I see that there are 5 publishers, I won't go forward.
Too much work.
Too much work. So if you are a songwriter and you're in a situation where you're writing songs, doing co-writes, create an administrator, one person that is going to administrate and control the publishing for that song.
One-stop shop, because you can go to that person. I've made it easier for you to get my music.
Yes, just a one-page, yes, you have the right to administrate this song on my behalf. Now, they're not going to take your monetary ownership, but I only have to call one person, and when I look it up online, I only see one person.
Right. Talk about some of the ways that this whole business has changed in the last 5 years and the last 10 years, because due to people like yourself, you've actually put bands on the map that nobody would have heard of. And I feel like bands there's this pie in the sky idea. Oh, I'm just going to get my song in a commercial and that'll be it, you know? So how has that changed since you started?
Well, I think the thing that's extraordinary about it, two things. It is now as powerful a distribution channel as radio. And it mimics radio, getting your music into a television commercial, because of repetition. Repetition is what makes radio powerful, right? And its reach is nothing without hearing that song 3, 4, 5, 20. You know, I mean, why is Adele still on the charts after 100-something weeks after the release? It's radio, it's repetition, it's in people's minds constantly. So when you get your music into a commercial that has a huge media buy, meaning that you're going to see that commercial a lot, it does the same thing. Yeah. A good example is the band Fun, spelled F-U-N period. And they got their song into the song called Tonight, or We Are Young is the name of the song, into a Chevy commercial that was on the Super Bowl. Aired like crazy. Now, they were technically on a major, but that major was ready with everything. They were ready with the release. They were ready with press. They had all these other things going on, and that commercial was just kind of the launch pad for them. And then from there, that completely made that band blow up. For an independent, the exact same thing can happen. They just have to have the gun cocked. They have to have everything else ready to go, because the commercial is going to make you money, but it'll be here today, gone tomorrow if you don't have all the other things in place ready to talk about them. The first thing you need to do if you get your music into a commercial is get that commercial from the ad agency or whomever it was, get it up on your YouTube site. Yeah. Tag the heck out of it. Every person that you know that was involved in making that commercial, put their name on it, so that people are searching for it and they're finding you. If it's a Heineken commercial, say Heineken commercial, Heineken TV commercial, any version that you can find of that, and adding your name to it, because someone like me may see that commercial, or a fan may see that commercial, and then we don't know how to find you. Right. But with YouTube, you can. Right. And you can help people find you.
Do you find that there's real kind of trends going on, or do you think that there are some things that are evergreen that are always going to work? For instance, when you started breaking it down for me, and it was fascinating because I am a musician and I make music, but the kind of music that's getting placed in commercials has sort of a specific sound. Like it was like quirky female and male voices mixed together, very sound designy, very quirky, interesting. Is that a trend? Is that an evergreen thing? I mean, how do you help identify what people really are looking for?
Yeah, so some of the things that you have to, that are evergreen are what it is that we need the music to do. First of all, whether you're working in film, TV, or advertising, you're working in 30 seconds. Right. So, you know, if you're telling stories over 4 minutes, I'm telling a story in 30 seconds. Right. So I use this analogy a lot. I say, if you wrote a song that said, I woke up this morning, I got out of bed, I walked down the street, I picked up a penny, I put it in my pocket, and I fell in love. I can't use that. It's too difficult. It's like fitting a square peg in a round hole. But if you say, I woke up this morning and I fell in love, that is very universal and could mean so many different things that it can work to picture. So keeping your lyrics really general is really important. We love vocal instrumentation, do-do-dos, da-da-das, that kind of thing, because it allows for us to hear a vocal and for that to add to the piece of music, but without disrupting any other narrative that may be going on. And allows a little bit more to the imagination.
Yeah, and when you're making records, wouldn't it be a good idea to always make versions that are instrumental, always make, while you're in the studio, make a version, or maybe take a song that you think is really incredible but has a lot going on and maybe do a little edit that's super simple, like maybe be thinking in the recording process.
Less is more when it comes to licensing. Right. The denser the track is, the more difficult it is for us to use, because it can kind of, let's just say that it is a featured piece of music and it's out front and there's no other sound elements other than the song. if it's too dense, it kind of walks all over the picture, and it's too heavy. So less is definitely more. That's why you hear a lot of acoustic now, a lot more organic sounds. You know, Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros have done really well because there's lots of like shouting in the background, and we love glockenspiel for that very reason. Hand claps, you know, we laugh at that kind of stuff because we do end up using it a lot. More cowbell, the old joke. But those things are trends. So evergreen are the things that we talked about before. Trends right now are kind of vocal instrumentation, glockenspiel, hand claps. Singer-songwriter music is doing very, very well in licensing, and specifically in television more than anything. But in advertising, we tend to break a little more barriers. Emotionally, we can't go a lot of places because we're trying to sell something. So we're not really ever going to get sorrow or negativity, or anything that starts to go towards the negative. We're going to be backing away from that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Any particular projects that you're really proud of, or bands that you feel like you pretty much launched, or what are some highlights from your career?
Oh man, there's so many. Well, if you guys want to see the work that I've done, I have a very simple YouTube channel where a lot of my spots are. It's
What's that?
YouTube.com/Sarah Gavigan.
Sarah Gavigan on YouTube. We will check that out.
Yeah. One spot that is actually on there that I ended up doing last year that I just kind of have a soft spot in my heart for, it was actually for Humana. And it was aimed...
What's Humana?
Humana is an insurance company, health insurance company, and it was aimed at baby boomers. So, you know, I'm like talking to my mom and dad and like, okay, this is aimed towards you. I'm trying to tug some heartstrings. It's about grandparents. So I needed to find a song that was recognizable, that they would remember if they heard it, but I needed it to have a more modern feel. And I love doing remakes for that very reason. So we actually ended up using an old Phil Spector song, To Know You Is to Love You.
Cool.
And I found an artist that had done an amazing cover of it, completely unknown artist. And his name was Stick Boy, I think. And that money ended up financing, I think, 2 records for him. And it was a great thing. It's really nice to see when you're able to help an artist finance their career.
I bet.
Yeah, it's really fun.
You must get inundated, though.
I do.
And you're in Nashville, Music City, and some of these people must be your friends.
Yes.
So how do you handle that, you know?
Yeah, I do a lot of teaching, and so I have learned how to be very diplomatic about that. It's difficult to give people feedback without, you know, crushing their dreams. That is definitely a hard part of what I do, but there are some hard, fast rules that we've talked about today. And you know, one of the things that I think is important to know as a musician is you have to have a stick that you're going to hold yourself up to, and you can't live in a box by yourself. You have to take your music out there, you have to get feedback, and you have to be willing to hear feedback, but know what you're good at and what you're not. A great story of a musician that I think found that this world suited him and took to it, his name is Tim Myers, spelled M-Y-E-R-S. Just Google him. And he was in LA, you know, living the dream, trying to make it as a performer. And a licensing rep saw him and went up to him and said, hey, I think your music is perfect for licensing. I'd like to represent you. The first song that they licensed for him, I think, ended up being in the final episode of like the 3rd season of Grey's Anatomy, in the final moments, and like one of the most coveted spots you could get in television. He sold 40,000 singles that day.
Unbelievable.
Of that song. Then he decided he didn't want to be a performer anymore, and he started writing specifically for licensing. Writes 1 song a day. He's written with Joy Williams. They got the huge Oscar Mayer TV commercial together. He's probably making more money than the majority of musicians that are on major labels.
I would think so.
So, you know, the lesson there, I think, is that he found a niche that he was good at and took it, ran with it, and now he's really enjoying his life as a musician. So
I bet, and he can actually be a musician. You know, a lot of times I think with musicians, it's like, you know, I'm a songwriter and I made this song, and this song is like this, you know, perfect song that expresses my heart and soul. But what I think I hear you saying is like being willing to take those pieces apart and really understand and see it from the other side.
Commerce.
Yeah.
There's art and there's commerce.
Right.
And they have to coexist.
Right.
Or else, you know, you're never going to end up having the life that you want as a musician. I mean, everybody's got to eat. So I think it's important to know that you can have a duality in that. And, you know, just the other day when I got hired on a job, a Beastie Boys track was referenced, and you know, with the passing of MCA, he said very clearly, all through the press, they made a very big deal of it, that he refuses to let the rights go to licensing.
Yeah, this is Adam Yauch, Beastie Boys, who died, and he said in his will that nobody was allowed to use his stuff in commercials.
And I think that that's really important to take note of as a musician. There are several musicians that did not indicate in their will whether they wanted that to happen or not. And in some cases, I've licensed tracks where the public has been really adamant that I was in some way, or that the organization that I was working for in some way it was just travesty that we would do that to
bastardizing the vision of the artist. And,
But as an artist, you have to make sure that it is written down what you want. So take note. If you don't ever want your music to be in an oil company commercial, then make note of that somewhere, so that if something happens to your rights, if this is your art and it's precious to you, be organized about it, so that it is very clear.
Right. So you give seminars and you do public speaking. Where can we find your seminars and sign up for them? Yeah,
I do online teaching, which I really, really enjoy, and I have 2 on-demand classes that you can sign up for and take at any time. One is called Music Licensing 101, and it's just basically going to give you a 360-degree view of this entire business, the music licensing business. Professional terms that you need to know, conduct, tips on how to get my attention. You know, taking all those years and 500 emails a week that I'm getting, and what are the ones that stand out to me and why. And then in a much more in-depth workshop, I go into the world of advertising and really break that down for people, because very few music supervisors come from that side of the fence. Most come from film and TV, and it's a completely different beast than ads. But you can find it at getyourmusiclicensed.com, and all the sign-up is there.
So cool.
Yeah.
It was awesome having you as our guest.
Thanks.
So much information. You got to come back.
Love to.
And share more, because as a musician living in Nashville, this really is an area that, you know, who knows, if you could make this work, you can afford to make your albums. But we all got to be looking ways to monetize what we do. And thank you so much for being here to help artists figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
It can be complicated.
Yeah.
You know, I think sometimes that the artists maybe get a little off put by the, you know, the licensing side. And I know that you're going to help demystify that on your online course. So check it out. Sarah Gavigan right here on Music Business Week. I'm your host, Greta Gaines. Stay tuned next week. Microcasting for your city. Talkopolis.